Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. And today we have a very special guest joining us here on the podcast, a very special episode of Blossom, where we are welcoming the former Minister for Health, Finance, Treasury, Industry, Science, Home Affairs and Resources, best-selling author and friend of the show, Mr. Jack Heath. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me here on the Irrational Fear podcast. Which one of you is Dan Illich?
None of us are Dan Illich. You've been misled, I'm sorry to say.
Horribly misled.
That agent.
That guy needs to be fired. So please, I was going to say, please welcome Jack Heath to the podcast. They have done in their heads.
Great. Awesome.
Mr. Jack Heath, please tell us about the new book that you've got coming out, or has come out, Headcase. What's going on there?
Cool. Diving right in. So I have a new book out. It's called Headcase.
Oh, you've got it right there.
The gist of it. Yep. Here's one I prepared earlier.
Nice. I assume you've got some boxes of them around the house, or
actually, I only have 7 left. I went a bit nuts, like mailing them to people who I thought might like them, like people who didn't even ask for a copy necessarily. So,
you've been introduced to the discipline of sales. Welcome, Jack. Here's something you didn't ask for. Do you want to buy something from me?
Yeah. And then I had to go out to my local bookstore and buy more copies to make up for all the ones that I'd given away. So I'm there at the counter.
Hang on.
So that's
exactly what Jared Kushner did. That's how he got on the New York Times bestseller list.
That's exactly right. Except I don't know about him, but I was definitely there at the counter going I have heard good things about this book. It's Headcase by Jack Heath. Is this the new Jack Heath? And it's out today, you say? I will take 5 copies, please. 2 so I can read in stereo, 2 so I can also read in stereo later, and 1 more for good luck, because it is that good of a book, I have heard.
Boy, I can't wait to spend all this money on Headcase by Jack Heath.
I've only had
so this is at Wendy's.
Can you claim it back on tax or do something weird to get?
Surely that's a business expense.
You're paying yourself.
I'm just looking at the account, looking at the receipts at the end of the year, going, "It seems like you really spent a lot of money on this guy, Jack Heath, and his books."
Yeah, there's various things that I do where I'm never not sure whether they're deductible, but I'm 99% sure buying copies of my own book in order to send them to people in the media and stuff is deductible. That's a legitimate expense. Whether I'll break even on it is another question, but I'm sure it's deductible. Anyway, so the new book, basically a dead Chinese astronaut is found on the surface of Mars, but it's not the real Mars. It's a NASA training environment in Houston, Texas, and no one is quite sure how he got there. So the CIA sends the main character, Timothy Hangman Blake, to investigate because they're worried that there's a Chinese spacecraft secretly above their heads in geostationary orbit. And then all these NASA scientists are around saying, that's not how space works. You can't just fall off a spaceship and land on the ground without burning up on re-entry or anything like that. So Timothy Blake becomes pretty sure that something else is going on, but he's a cannibal. So his main interest is that he just kind of wants to get the body. The whole book is imagine The Old Man and the Sea, except the fish is a dead body and his goal is to eat it. Was that the plan in The Old Man and the Sea? Was the old man going to eat the fish anyway?
I think he was.
I think it was at least defeating it, right?
He was out there with the intention to catch a fish, to eat a fish, I think.
Yeah.
But then things got out of hand. I think
it's more about the chase of the fish, the chase of the ultimate goal, right?
Definitely things get out of hand in this one as well. He is the first chapter is him imprisoned in a psychiatric hospital explaining all this to his therapist who doesn't believe a word of it. So
you're probably wondering how I got here.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So even by Hangman standards, this is a pretty crazy book, but it's been in the works for a couple of years now. So I'm enormously relieved to have it finally out there and finding readers and stuff. Even if those readers are just me buying the same book over and over at the counter of my local bookstore.
It does. I love the first book in the series, the Hangman.
This is where George admits he hasn't read any more of them.
What? No,
No,
look,
that's all good.
in all fairness, I've been doing ding, 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 an MBA, so I haven't been doing much reading for pleasure.
We have an NBA reference.
And then a banner
it's early.
unfurls, like, we got him. So I haven't had much time for reading for pleasure, but I thoroughly enjoyed the Hangman novel. I can't wait to read the rest. So is this the third in the series? Is that right?
No, this one's actually the fourth.
Oh my goodness!
I've kept it going much longer than I expected to, or than makes any sense. But part of the purpose of like him explaining this to his therapist in the psychiatric hospital is that you don't actually need to read the ones in between or any of the others.
Nice.
Like everything you need to know about who he is and his situation and everything, it's there on page 3 or 4. So
previously on Cannibal Cop. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
I have to say, one of the scenes in the first. Shut up, Adam. One of the scenes in the first book, where spoiler alert, Timothy has to chew on a bit of himself to get out of a restraint, is like one of the most, like, it is one of the things that I have read in a book in fiction that has like most stuck with me as like a disturbing, like visceral moment.
Nice.
And so I just wanted you to know that that has traumatized me, that particular passage, for some years. So thank you for that.
I will take that as a compliment. I was reading one of my children's books to my 8-year-old son last night, and when he like went to bed and then couldn't sleep because he's like, I think we need to stop reading that book together. It's just too scary for me. And again, this is one of my children's books, but think Goosebumps. It's like a horror book for kids.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, we were watching. We were
the
reading
Scream ones. Yeah, they're fun.
I was like, oh dear, you poor kid. That's so rough. And then in my head, I'm like, yes,
got it.
Still got it. Scaring the shit out of people, whether they're like children or adult podcast hosts or whatever. So if you found that distressing, I will take that as a compliment. But
Thank you.
New readers to this series might wonder why he has only one arm, and also the other arm that he does have doesn't have a thumb on it. And it is explained, but it's not really important.
And I'd say to George, mate, you haven't read shit. That's the bit that disturbs you. You need to read the other ones, man.
I'm so curious as to what novel you were reading your kid, and I'm just assuming it was like, I don't know, a novelization of the film Hereditary. Like it must have been something like truly terrifying. Just like, and anyway, Gabriel Byrne set himself on fire. Like,
I had a really exciting moment the other day when so my son came home from school and he's like, Daddy, one of the other kids in school for show and tell, he was talking about your Scream books and he brought it in and was talking about how much he liked it. And I'm like, wow, kids are still reading my Scream books? That's amazing. Which one was it? And he's like, oh yeah, it's the one with the dummy called Slappy. And I'm like, fuck. that is not my book.
It's like, no,
that is famously by R.L. Stein.
Yeah.
It's the Goosebumps book.
That's
I'll
fantastic.
take credit.
But that also means that I guess, it's coming from your son rather than from the kids. But clearly it left enough of an impression of a similarity on there that like these works are equivalent.
Oh yeah, totally.
She's pretty great.
I think my son convinced the rest of his class that I am the author of all the Goosebumps books, and
Excellent.
I'll take it.
100%.
You guys should check out this really rad book that Jack Heath wrote. It's called Carrie. It's about this girl who's got psychic powers. It's pretty dope. Adam, you had a question earlier that I very rudely stepped on.
It's just incredibly rude. But I don't know if we've actually, because I don't read. I don't know whether you guys know this.
You're not a reader?
I just exist. But have we actually given the audience, for those who maybe like me, who may be interested in picking up a new author, have we given the elevator pitch for Hangman? Or are we just making cannibal references
like
for fun?
The original one. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So Hangman, the first book of the series, came out in 2018, and it's about a guy who is a civilian consultant for the FBI who specializes in missing persons cases because he's brilliant, but he's also a cannibal. And so the FBI, whose budget is perpetually stretched and is hella corrupt, decides to sort of get some cases solved on the cheap by saying, okay, for every case you solve, or rather, if you solve the case in time and find the missing person and they were actually in danger and now you've rescued them, then we will give you the body of a death row inmate who was going to be executed anyway. So it's not like he has to take a life to save one or whatever. They're just like, look, it's Texas. We have heaps of dead bodies because we keep executing people. Sure, some of them were innocent, some of them were mentally handicapped. That's neither here nor there.
The occasional mass shooting.
Yeah, exactly. We've got dead bodies. We'll give them to you in exchange for solving cases. And so it was supposed to be this kind of gruesome, horrific hypothetical that sort of satirized the US justice system. In truth, it never really worked as the sort of satirical literary novel that I originally intended it to be. But when we started turning it into a crime novel in the vein of, the Hannibal and Dexter type books, people started to like it. So, but at the end of the first book, he gets recruited by organized crime. And so then it became the second book was a sort of different genre. It was more like an organized crime noir. And the third one is more like an Agatha Christie style, locked room, small house, limited pool of suspects out in the middle of nowhere type book. Wow. And Headcase is a spy novel. So, because he works for the CIA now. So every book in this series, I try to experiment with a different genre a little bit. But there's always a body. He always wants to eat it. He always ends up solving the case of who murdered the body as sort
don't
of
give away spoilers, Jack.
The fundamentals are there. The
usually
important
finds out. Yeah, usually finds out who killed the person and maybe eats them as well.
It's pretty bad though. Like if you're 4 books in and the first 3 books, the main character didn't do what he's meant to do. It's just been failing upwards to the well.
Speaking of failing upwards, I think that might be a good opportunity to transition into talking about Scott Morrison, former Prime Minister of Australia.
He failed further upwards than anyone else in the history of this country. I think.
Yes. Yes. So you might have heard that Scott Morrison had... sorry. Before we move on, Jack, tell us the release. Obviously, the book is released. Where can people find it?
It came out on November 29, so it's available in all good bookstores and some bad ones. That's in Australia. It'll reach the UK. Sorry, it'll reach New Zealand pretty soon. Like copies are in shipping containers on their way across the Tasman, and we've got the ebook is worldwide, and there'll be a print release in the UK and the US sometime next year. So yeah, it's around. It's called Headcase. Hope you like it.
You give me the Christmas present idea and Andy for my dad. So thank you very much.
There you go.
Fantastic. I hope it is to his taste.
Pun intended. For information on that, people should go to jackheathwriter.com.
Yep, that's right. And at Jack Heath Writer on all the socials, even, Twitter still and Mastodon.
Is Mastodon a thing?
I'm everywhere for better or worse. Oh yeah, I'm on writing.exchange/@ Jack Heath Writer on. That's my Mastodon.
Nice.
Nice.
Alrighty. So Scott Morrison. So people might be aware of the former Prime Minister and current bag of shit, Scott Morrison, who appointed himself to a number of secret ministries, including, as I mentioned, Health, Finance, Treasury, Industry, Science, Home Affairs, and Resources. There was an official censure motion passed in Parliament this week, which said, you're a very naughty boy. You're not the Messiah. You're just a very naughty boy. As we suspected, when the report came out, nothing much happened. 3 guys on a podcast, I believe, at the time, the revelations emerged, recognized that it was TLDR, immoral but not illegal, and that was the finding of the report. But they've issued a rather scathing, or I should say, everyone who's not the Liberal and National Party, bar Bridget Archer, recognise that it was a pretty fucked up and gross thing to do and have censured him in Parliament.
They've written the very angry letter telling him how angry they are.
Yeah,
they've written
that's what
censuring
is. It's just the literal definition.
A little slap on the wrist.
To express severe disapproval of someone or something, especially in a formal statement, which... what's the point?
The point is
the history books.
The point
is
on
the record that it was bad.
We don't approve of this, and it was bad. Even if there's nothing we can legally do to, feed you to an angry cannibal who wants to solve crimes, there's there's a recognition that the thing that you did was fucked up, and you shouldn't do it, and please don't do it again.
Certainly,
when he
please.
had a chance to respond, that was the thing that I found really
That was
weird.
weird.
It was like, we're gonna tell you how angry you are. Now you get a chance to defend yourself, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Especially since I didn't quite understand this, but Tony Burke, I gather, so he was the one who moved the censure motion. He's like the employment minister and arts minister in the current government, in the Labor government, and he was. So he not only said that he wanted to. He not only gave Scott Morrison right to reply, but he moved to remove the time limits. Like, he wanted to give Scott Morrison as much time as he wanted to respond to this. And was he hoping ScoMo would get enough rope to hang himself, or
Yeah.
what was the idea with that?
It has to be, right? Like, well, what's the other conclusion? It's just like, you know what I miss the sound of? Scott Morrison's voice. That's what I really want to hear at length. No, surely the idea is like, no. You talk about this as much as you like, buddy. There's cameras here, and here, and this is going to be on the 7:30 report tonight. So
he must have known that you weren't going to get like a sort of thoughtful mea culpa from Morrison where he goes like, in retrospect, I shouldn't have done that.
was anyone expecting that?
Well, no, I guess not. But I just feel like there's this risk kind of Scott Morrison it's probably not, I try to keep like apolitical, but it's probably not an exaggeration to say that he is perhaps a man with flaws, and perhaps his greatest flaw, in my opinion, is his optimism. Like, that's always been, in some senses, it was a strength. Like, there was the election before last where everyone said he was going to lose, and he was still like traveling around the country going to sort of marginal seats like he thought he might still win, as opposed to just trying to shore up support in the home base and stuff. And then he did win. He's like, aha, a miracle. But that also means that when something like a pandemic happens, he's like, well, it won't get that bad.
She'll be
Or
right.
when a bushfire comes, he's like, well, the fire looks bad, but it probably won't get so bad that I don't get to go on holiday. Like, he's this very optimistic guy. And so the fact that he thought he could take on all these extra ministries, presumably believing that he would win the election because he has this enormous amount of self-belief, is like, just imagine if he'd won and he was the minister for everything, having like done all this and had like absolutely taken over the country. It's just some scary stuff, like how close we went to having a dictator.
Okay, good. No, you sort of brought it back there at the end. I was thinking like that might be the most generous interpretations of the secret ministries ordeal that I've ever heard. Is just
trying
an
really
absolute
hard.
fit of optimism. The guy just reckons he can do anything. He's going to take us to the fucking moon.
Yeah, right. Well, I also think there's kind of a risk that with all this focus on the secret ministries, not that we shouldn't focus on them, but there's this risk of kind of looking at the previous government as like one bad apple. Like, oh, well, look, he didn't tell any of his colleagues that he was doing this. There were like other ministers who didn't know that he had stolen their ministry. Look, they were just a bunch of good stand-up people who were conned by this one sort of con artist. And it kind of neglects the, Christian Porter
9
and
years
Angus
of terrible
Taylor and
shit.
all the scary like corruption stuff that was going on.
People
that,
forget the phrase. They're like, oh, it's just one bad apple. It's just one bad apple. We don't have to worry about it because it's just one bad apple. But the whole phrase one bad apple comes from one bad apple spoils the entire barrel. The whole point of the one bad apple thing is that if you leave bad apples in there, it's going to rot all of the other apples. That's the point of the bad apple. And that's exactly what's happened. You're right. It's like, oh yeah, it's just one charismatic, amazing leader who just fucking smashes it at the ukulele playing April Sun in Cuba. And he's just led them all astray. They were just lemmings, just sheep in the flock that were, bamboozled by this marketing genius. It's like, no, you're all idiots and you were misled by a really big idiot. And you followed him along, not only like happily, but like very willingly into this whole escapade. So, so it's emerged that, let's just let the dummy speak for himself, shall we?
I have no intention now, Mr. Speaker, of submitting to the political intimidation of this government using its numbers in this place to impose its retribution on a political opponent. I am proud, Mr. Speaker, at a time of extreme trial, my government stood up and faced the abyss of uncertainty that our country looked into and the coercion of a regional bully and saw Australia through the storm. Australia emerged stronger under my government. In addressing the matters that are the subject of the motion, I repeat that I've welcomed and support the recommendations of the Bell Inquiry, and I note the following facts for the House. The authorities to administer departments were established as a dormant redundancy, only to be activated in extraordinary circumstances, evidenced by the fact that no powers were exercised under these authorities, except in the case of the PEP 11 decision, as such circumstances were not realised and therefore none of these authorities were misused.
The most
I
galling...
took all the power, but I didn't misuse them.
I didn't
so
use
it's
it.
okay.
I didn't use it. Why are you guys being such bitches about this?
I actually didn't hear any of that clip at my end, but can I guess that he kind of said something like, "Oh, well, obviously I should have been more candid about that at the time, but really, I apologize without actually saying I did anything wrong, and in fact, it was all of you who did something wrong, and possibly Jenny." Was it something like that?
Oh, Jack, it was even worse. Like, he didn't apologize. He said he did nothing wrong, and just like double, triple, double down.
Yeah, he Marco Rubio'd on it.
Yeah.
Right.
He's always going to be like, for him, like, it's also about his legacy and his government's legacy. So, like, he's going to like say that. Like, if he was to admit wrongdoing, it kind of makes him look. It kind of puts, it makes him look bad.
For doing wrong.
So it's a classical thing. It's like the same thing that Trump does, right? It's like, oh well, I'm backed into a corner, and I'll just say that I was right and you're wrong, and then that's the way it is.
Yeah,
it's so
I'm not sure.
gross though.
Yeah, go on.
It's so gross because initially I knew he was going to do this. Like, there was no surprises when this whole thing kicked off, and it was announced that there were these secret ministry powers and yada yada yada. He said, "Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to cooperate with any well-intentioned inquiry." And I was like, well, well-intentioned is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, because you can turn around and then whatever inquiry comes about, you go, "Oh, well, I was happy to cooperate with a well-intentioned inquiry, but this is about intimidation and retribution." It's like, no, it's about basic accountability, which is what your government failed to grasp at the time, which is why you are no longer in power, number one. And it's just about like transparency and democracy and human decency. And if you can't see that, you shouldn't be in parliament at all anymore, let alone leading the country. Like, it's just a complete failure to acknowledge that anything, like, I've ever done anything wrong. Everything I did was right because I was the one who did it, so it must have been right. Like, it's this circular logic.
I got to admit, I completely forgot that he was still in Parliament until this happened. Like, that he's been sitting there up there in the backbench this whole time, where I'm like, wow, it really kind of feels like the Australian people as a whole resoundly cast you into the abyss.
Yeah.
And I forgot that you were still there, still representing the people of Cook.
And just imagining him sitting there up the back while like the main cabinet all down on the floor where he used to be sitting or all trash talking him is very satisfying from my perspective. I'm like, yeah, he had to listen to them debate whether or not they were going to call him a big piece of shit on the record.
I'm glad you're getting a bit of schadenfreude there, Tom. But so one of his strengths/flaws is his optimism, but the other one of ScoMo's strengths/flaws is his shamelessness, right?
Yes.
I don't think he feels humiliated sitting there in the backbench.
I don't think he feels anything. He's a sociopath.
Oh. Well, I'm not a psychologist, so I won't speak to that. But I'm
a podcaster, and I can say it regardless.
Is that how defamation law works?
I'm pretty sure it's how it works.
Yeah, Jack, you said that you're normally apolitical, but you are, in fact, on a very political podcast.
I don't know if you're aware of that.
I'm a regular listener of you guys' podcasts, so I knew what I was walking into.
Okay,
I
good.
was like, do you remember that time George Christensen went on a podcast that turned out to be Nazis or something? And on
I don't, but that checks out. Yep.
yeah, at the time I naively thought, well, he probably didn't know they were Nazis when he went on the podcast. And now I'm like, maybe he just wanted some plausible deniability about knowing or not. But I'm like, well, if he can get away with going on like a far right podcast, I can probably get away with going on a far left podcast.
Far left, how dare you? Center left and Adam.
See, this is the point where I'll unblur my background. It's just swastikas. Just all over here. So,
look, is that Nick Fuentes and Kanye West in the background? Oh no,
Yep,
Tom.
No.
He did it so well.
The thing that really... Sorry, go on, Adam.
No, I was just going to say that the thing that I find with Scott Morrison is we're constantly surprised by the hubris. But, I mean, you think about it, like this is the guy that stopped the boats, and every time you ask him about stopping the boats, he's just really fucking happy about it.
Big old boat stopper.
Really excited that he got a boat stopper, and he stopped the boats, and he got a trophy for it, and there's no sort of... You never really hear any sort of reflection on the human cost to that. There's just, I was right. Like just 100%. And maybe you have to be in a position like that. But, it's that same, as Jack pointed out, it's that same like rigorous optimism.
Empathy
some
gap.
might call, and that it creates an empathy gap. And he's just brought that along the whole way through his prime ministership.
The most disturbing part about all of this, to my mind, is that a bunch of Liberal MPs, like Bridget Archer was the only one to side with the government in censuring him. And I think Karen Andrews abstained from recollection. But yeah, there wasn't a wholesale attempt from the Liberals or the Nationals to make a show of excising him from the party and saying, hey, this behavior isn't on. We don't actually support you. What you did was wrong and you shouldn't do it again. They were just like, people of them were coming up to him afterwards and like shaking his hand. I just imagine the music from the God, da 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 da, and they're just like coming up and like kissing the ring. Scott, you're such a brilliant man. Like just sort of kissing the ring of the Godfather. It's like, why are you still enthralled to this man who got like thumped at the last election? Got your it's like the same American sort of acquiescence to Trump, where they're like, oh, he's the default leader of the party. We all need to kiss the ring. It's like, why? The guy's a fucking loser. He lost. Like, why are you still enthralled to this man who so obviously did the wrong thing? And you're still just going to be like, but you got to kiss the ring. I mean, it's Scott Morrison. Like,
is that part of why, though? I mean, after the wipeout of the last federal election, they have so few seats left. Yeah, that they can't afford to alienate anyone in their part. They can't afford to lose any seats. They can't afford to make any enemies. They're like, we're such a tiny party now, guys. we really need more focused
on not alienating other members of their party than they are the entire Australian electorate, which sounds pretty fucking spot on to my mind for the Liberal National Party. But
segue to the next article. Actually,
there you go. Keeping us on track. Well done, Adam.
Yeah.
So tell us about the Indigenous Voice to Parliament and what the Nationals are doing there, Adam.
Well, the Nationals realising that they've potentially got more power than what they thought they did. But obviously, one of Labor's key policies the last election was to have an Indigenous voice to Parliament, and they're in the works of doing that at the moment. And I think it will go through a referendum. But in the lead up to that, they've got to do a bunch of work in Parliament. Now, I guess the thinking was that, generally speaking, the Libs and Nats would vote together on this. But the other day, David Littleproud gave Peter Dutton a call about 10 minutes before this press conference and was like, hey, bro, we're actually not going to support the voice. Cheers. Goes to press conference.
Cheers, big ears.
And with his whole party behind him, proceeds to then outline why they're not going to support it. Which is, there's a really interesting ABC article here by, who's it by? David Spears, which sort of looks at the layers of it. But essentially, by all accounts, it's, I mean, I think that's the front of it is that they're saying, well, the process, broadly speaking, they're saying the process to lead to this thing isn't really well done, and there's no point supporting it if it's not exactly what's going to achieve the outcomes we want it to achieve. But David Spear's point, I guess, is that the real reason for this is just a power game to basically put the Liberals under pressure and to try and shift their position on it. Because by all accounts, the Liberals were going to support this motion.
Because it also seems like, let's talk about a little bit about the Indigenous Voice and what it would be. So there have been reports that have been, sort of put together previously as to what the structure would look like and how it would work. But essentially the thrust of it is providing an organised effort to bring Indigenous perspectives to the parliamentary body in aid of making decisions that affect Indigenous people, right? So we've had the Closing the Gap report for many years now, which sort of details all the
ways the gap hasn't closed.
Yeah, essentially, yes. The gap between, I'm trying not to use indelicate phrasing here, the rest of white Australia as compared with the Indigenous population and all the metrics in which those communities are not being served in the way that other communities are. And it does seem as though I don't buy the whole line that like, there's just not enough detail. We need to know more detail about it, because they were opposed to this previously. They said, famously, I think it was Scott Morrison said that we don't want a third chamber of parliament and all this sort of stuff. So they've been sort of they've recognized that this is an extremely popular political issue. 2/3 of Australians polled believe in an Indigenous voice to Parliament and having some kind of mechanism for serving up those views to Parliament. But it seems as though they've, in principle, always not really backed it properly. And the addition of this Senator Jacinta Price seems to have sort of calcified that they've got a figure around which they can sort of rally around for that position. And obviously it does.
Indigenous, we should mention.
She's an Indigenous woman, so I feel like that's given the National Party something to sort of coalesce around, even though it has been publicly reported that not all members of the Nationals are actually really on board with this strategy. But it does present a problem for the Albanese government in that it is rare historically for referendums to pass if you don't have support of both the major parties, because it's quite a rigorous process in that, Australia votes, you need, a majority of people and a majority of states all to vote in favor of the proposition. So not having it supported by all the major parties is an easy way to divide the electorate and make them feel like, well, if I'm a right winger and my right wing party doesn't support it, well, maybe I shouldn't support this at all. And then all of a sudden it's a horse race. So I think it's very problematic. But the thing that bugs me about it the most is that they say, we haven't got any detail. We haven't got any detail of the proposal, and we can't support something without any detail. And it's like, you all know that is not how this works. For all that's like, this is what you guys do for your job every day is you get ideas and then you say whether or not you're in favor of them in principle, and then you get the legislation and then you vote on it. Like, this is the process of how these things work. So to say we haven't got the detail yet, we don't know. It's like, well, do you support an Indigenous voice to Parliament? Do you have in principle support to that? Because if you do, you should maybe consider voting for the Indigenous voice to Parliament when the legislation comes. So it just seems very disingenuous to me, I guess, is my point.
It's interesting as well, because, David Spears has basically pointed out that, Little Proud has said that the reason for this is because of his conversations with stakeholders and something the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Linda Burney, said over recent days. And I quote, "The Minister herself made further announcements on Friday and Saturday around what the voice would look like in terms of emulating somewhat of what the old ATSIC model was." I'm actually not sure what ATSIC is.
It's Australian Torres Strait Islander Indigenous Commission. I'm not sure on that last word, but yeah.
Okay. But basically, like, the detail that they're referring to, there was no new announcement. There's been nothing sort of
No,
different.
and there's been a
announced.
bunch of
It's
nasty attacks against Linda and Bernie as well, saying, "Oh, we don't want a bunch of like coastal elites coming clad in Gucci to Indigenous communities and telling them what's best for them." And Linda Bernie's like, "Bro, I don't even own any Gucci. What are you talking about? Like, what the fuck?"
Do you think
there's no change in the substance?
Isn't that great? Like, we have no detail, but we have this amazingly specific detail.
But I've locked onto this detail in my head.
Wearing people are going to come tell them what to do. It's like, but you have no detail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, like so much of statements made by politicians these days, and maybe throughout all of time, I don't really know, but David Littleproud's speech all sounded quite reasonable if you don't know any of the context around it. Like when he was saying, we need more details, yeah, probably true.
Oh, and details good. I like details.
Yeah. And when he was saying, we don't want like wealthy Indigenous people in the cities who have all sorts of privilege that people in rural areas don't, including Indigenous people in remote communities. We don't want them speaking for them. That all sounds reasonable,
sounds reasonable if you don't know any of the facts.
Yeah, exactly. And if you ignore the fact that, okay, so what's your alternative proposition? Because he's like, okay, so what we should be doing is going out and speaking to Indigenous people in remote communities about what they want and filtering it through the normal processes of Parliament. I'm like, okay, so that's what we've been trying to do for decades and
working out
decades.
For you?
Yeah, exactly. The gap has not closed. Indigenous mortality rates and life expectancy, it's like horrific. Rates of, there's still Indigenous people dying in custody all the time. The community is over-policed, and there's like, we have to do something differently.
Status quo.
This is an opportunity to do something differently.
I like the status quo. Let's just leave it how it is.
The status quo sucks.
Yeah. The interesting
thing, I think Littleproud knows that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, well, you're right, because what they've said is that there's no evidence that this is going to actually have practical changes, that the voice to Parliament
so
is
why
going to
not
have
try
practical
it?
changes.
Give it a go. Who cares?
To Indigenous communities, but like that's sort of missing the point. This is a symbolic change. It's not designed to lift, thousands of people out of poverty. It's not a. You've got to start somewhere.
This is more giving people the opportunity to then enact the ideas and policies that would then lift maybe people out of poverty. It's like, this is let's allow them to ask the questions and like represent themselves.
But the thing is, you're right, Jack, like propose an alternative mechanism. In the report that was released a year ago, which outlines how a model like this would work, it would say, okay, there's certain representatives from each state and territory, and there's a particular group of bodies, people, I think it was about five people, that would represent the interests of rural communities. And it's like, okay, so in the balance of power, the rural communities actually have a pretty big say in how that would work if they were to adopt that model that was proposed. So it's like, so either you're not across the detail of what was proposed a year ago, which seems incredibly likely, or it's a completely disingenuous attempt to negate anything that might potentially come out of this future body by saying, oh, we don't know the detail. It's just leaving it how it is what we've been doing for the last 30, 40 years. So let's try something different. Here's this crazy idea. You might not agree with it. Here's this crazy idea where if people and their views are represented to Parliament, then Parliament might take actions in order to make their lives better. It's this crazy idea called representative democracy. I don't know if you ever heard of it, David Littleproud, but the idea is that by representing those views to Parliament, something might then get actually done because you've got subject matter experts on the ground who can tell you what's really going on and what's being effective and what's not. Let's just try it out. Let's see how it goes.
I think maybe what he's done is I think it's more strategic than it seems. I think it's bad for the National Party because they're going to come off looking racist, which is not,
that was so close.
Cindy Price is the one who's at the front. They can't be racist.
It did reek a little bit of that, like, sort of tokenism, like, look, and we've got an Indigenous lady who has the same shit point of view. And it's like, I don't know about that.
So I think it's going to be bad for the Nationals. I think it's more importantly going to be bad for Indigenous communities across Australia because it's going to turn what should be just a given.
A no-brainer, yeah.
Yeah, what should be a no-brainer, they're going to turn it into a shit fight. So that's bad. I think it might be good for Littleproud personally, though, because he's still got Barnaby Joyce in his party. And if Littleproud had said, yes, of course we support the voice to Parliament, it's a no-brainer, then Barnaby Joyce would be able to stand up in front of the media and say, you know what? Well, I have the world's dumbest opinion, and I'm great at spreading dumb opinions and in such a way that...
Speaking of no-brainers, I have no brain. Barnaby Joyce.
Yeah, but it would have given him the opportunity to get in front of the cameras, and whenever that happens, he ends up as leader again. So I feel like Little Proud somehow. I don't understand his charm. I don't know what Vicky sees in him. I don't know what any of the people who vote for him see in him, but he somehow manages to keep getting elected leader if you ever give him the oxygen. So David
That's
Little
a good point. He emerges, if anyone gives him oxygen, he emerges with a leadership and a new family. So for the sake of Vicky, we really need to make sure this doesn't get off the ground.
Exactly. So I think Little Proud, I don't think he even thought about it for half a second. He's like, what would Joyce do? Okay, I'm going to do that so as he doesn't have the opportunity to do it.
So you're saying the WWJD bracelet that he's got on actually stands for Barnaby Joyce, not Jesus? That makes a lot of sense.
That's exactly what it stands for, yes.
Speaking of... speaking of Australian
corruption?
Parliament. Yeah, there we go. Corruption in the body politic. A national anti-corruption piece of legislation has passed the Senate with some amendments which would pave the way for its establishment. So we've got a photo of Mark Dreyfus here looking, I don't know.
Heroic.
Yeah, I think that's the vibe he's trying to give off there. It's like a profound sense of like noble victory that he's trying to project. But
he thinks he's already a statue of himself.
I think maybe this photo was the model. He's just like, let me just get a couple of photos of me looking statuesque for the press gallery, and then when I get my statue, we'll put it alongside Dan Andrews's.
Yeah, he just came out to the podium and just didn't start talking for a while, just like stares off into the distance. He's like, is Mark okay? He's just like, this is when hopefully everyone gets all the pictures. Like,
Mark, you all right, bud?
Mark, you got anything to say, mate? Keep staring.
So the bill has passed the Senate with some amendments by the Greens, which I'm fine about because I don't think I'm sure those will only serve to strengthen the body. David Pocock obviously contributed to the process, and they've got it all done in advance of Christmas. I think the commentary has been like, oh, why couldn't they have just waited after Christmas? But I definitely understand
we ask every freaking year. It's like, why do we have to rush this through before Christmas?
But I think the government understands that this is what happens to a legislative agenda. If you have things that stall and get pushed out into the next cycle, that's another 3 months next year where you're going to be talking about this, which is pretty uncontroversial, as opposed to anything else that the government wants to have on its agenda. And the more as a government you lose momentum in terms of talking about the things that you want to talk about, the more it benefits the other side. So
let's also remember that Morrison promised it in like 2018 or whatever that was, and just never got around to it. Well, Christmas is coming. And
too busy building car parks.
Yeah, exactly.
Interestingly enough, Wilkie, I have a particular following for Andrew Wilkie, who's an independent from Tasmania, because I am from Tasmania. But one of the things he was calling for was that they, speaking of like corruption and pork barrelling, was for pork barrelling to be basically put in the corruption, one of the definitions. I don't think it ended up getting through because
that's our system of government.
That's the system of government. But I was really impressed that he did call that out, because I mean, you think about it, like, I mean, it kind of is, if you're just funneling sports rorts and car parks to electorates to sort of that don't really need it, then
in order to secure seats,
it's kind of a form of corruption.
I get it, but there's a very fine. It is hard, or it could be hard, to distinguish exactly the difference between a member delivering for their community and pork barreling, which is why it's always been a sort of contentious area. But when you see, like, when it's in black and white, like, we recommend the car parks either don't exist or don't go here, and then like the relevant minister has written over it with a Sharpie, get wrecked, Carl. I'm going to put those fucking car parks where the fuck I like, mate. Then
please tell me that's an actual quote.
No, it's not. I might be paraphrasing there, but
no.
It is clear to see that taxpayer money is not being used to benefit the people as much as it is to benefit the politicians, and that's a problem. It is harder to nail down than I gave you a canvas bag with a $sign on it, and then you voted for my thing. You know, like that's easier to pin down from a corruption standpoint, easier to prosecute. Certainly.
You can't just take a car park to the bank. So it's much more subtle. Like, yeah.
A car park. I want a car park in Murrelbach Station, small bills only.
I don't know whether to be pessimistic or optimistic about this. Like, the pessimistic side of me goes like, okay, so there's an anti-corruption legislation. I haven't read the legislation. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what it covers and what it doesn't. But the fact that both parties voted for it makes me deeply suspicious. I'm like, well,
it's probably wise.
Okay. I am like, I don't know for sure that all of you are corrupt. There are some of you I am certain about. There are others I am less certain about. But there are enough dodgy people voting yes on this that I'm like, maybe it's not really going to do anything or change anything. And certainly, like the Greens wanted something different, right? They wanted the
they did have some amendments that they
clause and,
that they added,
and some of the cross-mention stuff. But if I can channel my inner Scott Morrison for a moment and be optimistic, I can go, well, hang on, maybe there are people in Parliament who don't like being corrupt. Hear me out. Like, maybe there are people where they're like, okay, I have a choice between either accepting all this money from a mining company or losing the election because my opponent accepts the money from the mining company. And so that person, I can imagine them standing up in Parliament and going, yes, I vote for this anti-corruption thing, so as neither me nor my opponent gets to be swayed by the mining company. Yeah, and then I can actually do my job. And I know that, so my local member, or rather my federal member in my local area, I'm not sure what you call that, is a Labor guy named Andrew Lee, who is just generally amazing. He's a really, really cool guy. He has an economics background rather than a law background, which is, not unheard of in politics. But as you guys observed on your podcast very recently, there's a lot of lawyers, in Parliament, and not so many people with other backgrounds. But so Andrew Lee wrote a book called What's the Worst That Could Happen, which outlines like 6 different ways the world might end. And one of them is climate change. There was a whole section on, he's like, okay, there's a likelihood that climate change will be bad. There's an unlikelihood that it will be way worse than we think. And he was focusing on the sort of 1 in 6, 1 in 20, 1 in 100 chance of turning Earth into Venus, like this sort of uninhabitable, ghastly wasteland. He talked about how the Amazon rainforest, the smaller it gets, so the Amazon rainforest actually produces its own rain as the air goes through the forest. That leads to more rainfall, which supports the forest.
It's its own internal climate.
Yeah. But that means there's a tipping point, right? Where once 20% of the Amazon is gone, it no longer generates enough rainfall to keep the rest of it alive, and then the whole thing dies out. And since that 20% estimate was made, 17% of it has gone. So there's only like 3% left before that tipping point. There's a similar thing where there's a 1.5 trillion tons of carbon under the permafrost in the Arctic. They call it a carbon bomb. So that's twice as much carbon as is in the whole atmosphere at the moment, and it's sitting under 10 feet of ice. If that melts and it comes out, like, boom, that's game over. And there's another thing in Antarctica. The point is, Andrew Lee knows all this stuff, and he is nevertheless in the Labor Party, which just voted to approve a bunch of more like gas exploration and things like that. So I know for sure that there are people in at least the Labor Party and probably both major political parties who know that, like, hey, the policies we are putting together might actually end the world, but we can't do anything about it if we're not in power.
If we're taking
and we
money
can't
from
get
one
into
side.
power without taking money. So I can imagine those people like voting for anti-corruption things so as they can actually do their jobs, because deep down, maybe they're good. Just maybe. That's my premise.
Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, it's a very optimistic take, Jack. I have to say.
I know you don't do that on this podcast.
No, this is not what we're about.
People are garbage.
Yeah, I think that might be the tagline of the show, in fact. But I certainly think there is, you're right, that there is an impetus to, like, I personally believe in publicly funding elections for the exact reasons that you described, right? You don't have the whole idea of funding political parties is at its core to exert influence. The whole point of that is to push policies that you as the donor would like, and that, you know, to disincentivize policies that you would not like. So I think there are a bunch of well-intentioned people who go into politics, and the system, the machine, kind of chews them up and spits them out a little bit and makes it do what the system wants them to do. And I think money in politics has a really big say in that, as a big influence, and especially considering, you know, there's a big portion of our donations that, if they are disclosed after 18 months, there's not a lot of detail about it, and, you know, some donations are never disclosed at all or altogether. Like you know, there was a great film by one of the Chaser guys last year, which talked about it was called Big Deal, I think. And it was all about money in politics and how it works in Australia. And it's much, much less transparent than even the American system, which should lead you to some measure of anxiety, I think. But
my friend Kate Griffiths works for the Grattan Institute, and she does a lot of work on this particular issue. And she was explaining to me a while ago that, there's basically no limit to the amount of money you can donate to a political party, because there's theoretically it has to be disclosed above a certain point, but in practice you can pay $10,000 to attend a dinner party fundraiser, and that's below the threshold. I think it was 10,000. The threshold was something like 14 at this time. But the point is, you can do that over and over as many times as you want. So
which is why Zali Steagall,
you've donated $500 million or something.
Which is why Zali Steagall got into trouble, because it's like, it's not as though, you know, she fell afoul of the rules because her donors weren't splitting it up into small enough payments as to go unregistered, and so therefore violated some cap. And they're like, look, see, she does it as well. And it's like, well, yes, but just because she hasn't quite got it on the organized industrial factory line scale that you guys have it organized at doesn't mean she's as bad as you guys. It means she's trying to get elected so she can do the right thing. So yeah, there is a certain thing about the machinery of politics where it kind of, you know, chews everyone up and sort of makes them the same, and that sort of allows the whataboutism, because it's like, well, if both sides do it, we're both equally as guilty, we're both as likely to change the system and actually do anything about it to change it. So
it also means there's limited.
I would like to add,
go on.
There's also just corrupt shitheads that want to make money for themselves. Like, there are probably a bunch of well-intentioned people that want to make the system better and are hamstrung, because how can one person change the system? But there's also a bunch of people that are just lining their fucking pockets and getting rich off of it, and then going to a 6-figure consulting job at the end of it because of all the contacts that they made. There are people that are just out for themselves.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But I think it means there's limited utility in focusing on the flaws and shortcomings of any individual politician, when it's much better to look at the system as a whole and say, okay, well, that guy's a dick, but the system is set up that it will always be someone like that in his position. Like, leaving even aside the money side of things, like if you look at someone like Morrison or someone like Trump, who has a sort of vague, distant relationship with the truth, or someone who has like worked out that you can say basically whatever you want, and if you get called out for lying and you just say, no, I didn't, and they say, oh, well, there's footage of you doing it, and they say, yeah, that could be anybody, and just move on, and there's never any consequences. If you set up a system such that there are no consequences for lying, then your leader will always be a liar. And so you don't blame, I hate to say, don't blame Trump, but you don't blame Trump specifically for that. You blame the system that you've set up, because even if you get rid of him, it will always be someone like him unless you change the system. And money in politics is the same.
You need to change the incentives. And that's why I think the only rational way to do that is to adopt a public funding model, just to take the interest, take the special interests out of it altogether, and then allow people to be judged on their own merits and on their actual policies, because doesn't affect them either way. So
don't we already have one, but it only kicks in if you lose the election? Like, if you campaign for office and then you don't win, but you get above a certain point,
there's a certain amount of public funding, but it's not enough to conduct a national federal election on, right?
No,
first preference votes is what does it, isn't it? Like, that's I remember that being a thing of when people talk about, oh, why would I vote one for a party that I know is not going to be the one that has the prime minister? You're like, well, because A, preferential voting, but B, like, that first preference can influence funding for next time.
Yes.
Kind of thing, right. Yeah. So I think there is an element of it, but yeah, you're right. It's not enough to actually like run a campaign, and you'll still have Village Roadshow or whatever donating money.
The cinema?
Yeah. Oh yeah, big Liberal Party donors from what I see, and then you also see all the piracy crackdown kind of stuff, like
okay,
like or media distribution or like nerfing. I'm big galaxy conspiracy theory brain here, but I don't think it's too much of a stretch. Nerfing the NBN.
Yeah, right.
Hurting streaming. All that sort of stuff. Like way back when, like not now. Obviously, now the NBN works fine and streaming dominates everything. But I'm talking like 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. I get it's probably more subtle than I was picturing, because I am mostly, as you probably get the impression, my main concern is like coal and gas and fossil fuel companies and stuff. Yeah. Like I want them out of politics because we might all die, or at the very least our children might. But I was like, Village Roadshow donating, how bad can that be? We'll have a cinema on every corner. Sounds wonderful. But yeah, actually,
big cinemas built next to every train station, regardless of whether you want them there.
That sounds fantastic. But yeah, when it gets to things like sabotaging the internet, that has flow-on effects, let's say.
The metadata stuff as well, because of cracking down on people doing piracy or whatever. But the ramifications of stuff like that, these influences come from everywhere.
There's never a good result as a result of privileging a certain small number of economically privileged people's voices above the populace. That is not what government is there to do. Government is there to represent the populace. So even you got the business council, it says, we're going to have this our way on industrial relations or whatever it is. If there is influence, even if it might seem benign or negligible, it's never going to be in the best interest of the community, because that would be the default. That would be the default if the money was not involved. Maybe I'm sounding like a democracy purist, like Aristotle, just being like, it's all about fucking democracy. But the whole idea.
I can confirm that you do not sound like Aristotle right now, George.
Maybe more like Socrates.
Aristotle had a few F words thrown in there. But
it's a pretty salty boy from what I recall. So
they swore in ancient Greece.
Yeah, they did, and modern day Greece as well. I can confirm. So, but the whole point is that if democracy is working well, it's unencumbered by these special interests, then the will of the people should speak through everything that, and any attempt to influence what Parliament is doing in a way that is not is not biased towards the interest of the people, is by definition subverting democracy to a certain extent. Does that make sense? Any other kind of influence will be corrupting to some degree.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying there's no such thing as good corruption.
Yeah. Basically.
It doesn't matter how much I like the person doing the donation to manipulate politics, then it's still bad that they are doing it. And I think I can get behind that central premise.
The problem is that, well, if the other side's got these tools at their disposal, we'd be silly not to use them, because then we'll be defeated. And so then it becomes like a self-defeating sort of arms race where you notice both sides of politics end up coming to represent more or less the same kinds of views. They're not too disparate from each other. Like Labor is now a centrist party, and the Liberal National Party is sort of a right-wing party, but they still agree on 85% of the issues. And it's like, how is that? How does that come about where there's such homogeneity amongst all of the different views that we have on 85% of the issues? It's only one or two wedge sort of things like climate change and abortion and XYZ. There are these handful of issues where we're completely worlds apart, but we all agree that banks shouldn't be regulated. It's like, well, how did that happen? How did we all agree?
Just to play there's this thing called shared culture and language and value sets, which a lot of people share.
What I'm saying is that is a narrative. And this is a point I wanted to come back to about what we were talking about the previous story. There is a narrative that has been generated by the powerful that we all agree that banks shouldn't be touched. We all agree that, and I think a lot of that is, I think a lot of that is fed to us by the apparatus, rather than, I think if you sat down and asked individual Australians, do you think banks should be regulated more thoroughly? I think you would find more of a plurality of visions of what that would look like in the populace than you see represented by the two major parties. It's a narrative that's...
Just to play the devil's advocate for a second, and I know you guys usually wrap up the podcast about this.
Get out of here, Jack!
But I'm sure that there is like there is a sort of alternate reality of you three where it's like a right-wing Unnatural Selection podcast where Tom and George have moustaches and Adam doesn't, and you're all wearing cowboy hats. It's like that alternate universe in Futurama.
It's called Sky News.
yeah, Sky After Dark. It already exists.
Yeah, okay. So on Sky After Dark, the version of George is there, and he gave exactly that same speech, but he was talking about Climate 200, right? And how on bad-mouthing Simon Holmes a court and saying like, you got to keep money out of politics because the mere fact that you've got a billionaire, the fact that you've got a billionaire and also a whole bunch of people like me who donated to Climate 200, deliberately messing with the system is bad. So isn't that good
they are having
corruption,
that
George?
conversation. No, but that's exactly the point. We shouldn't need to engage in quote unquote good corruption in order to have the views of the populace represented. We shouldn't have to. We should just have publicly funded elections and then be represented, and then those the will of the populace will naturally float up and be represented. Or in a way that is more natural than it is now.
Very simplistic way of doing it. Like, you're assuming that everyone in the populace is a rational actor and that they're all educated and know everything about every issue.
I'm not saying democracy is perfect. And people like Aristotle acknowledge this, is that they can still be whipped up by populists. There's still obviously things that can go wrong in a democracy. You know, you can have calcification where people stick to their side. You have partisanship and negative partisanship, and there's all these bad things that can happen during the course of a quote unquote a natural democracy. But I would say that all of that is still a purer representation of the will of the people than what we have currently, where whoever pays the most to win particular seats in particular races now gets to dictate climate change policy for all the rest of us who have a majority view that climate change is real and is happening and we should do something about it. That minority rule is profoundly undemocratic. And it's all through this manufactured consent of the media and the two-party system, and two parties are the only way to do things. And we all agree on these 85% of things. It's just this little 15% that we disagree on. And we're going to argue about it at length for 4 years and get nothing done. And then the next party is going to come in and they're going to roll it back. You know, like, we're divided, I guess, over a small number of things, and that stalls progress. And I think that is in no small part due to the influence of money in politics. It would be easier to get things done without it.
Okay, George, you've convinced me. How much can I donate to your campaign without being identified?
$9,999.
Yeah.
Send it to the Unnatural Show Patreon.
Will you take an Aldi bag, or does it need to be a credit card?
Ideally, a canvas bag with a $sign on it. Thank you very much.
It seems to be a weird thing in Australia where it's like the limits are always $10,000. Like, you can't deposit more than $10,000 in an ATM. You can't send a financial transaction across the internet without it being scrutinized if it's over $10,000. You can't donate to a political party if it's over $10,000.
Maybe inflation will get rid of corruption in politics because you can't do
$10,000 will be worth nothing
anymore.
Yeah.
It is interesting though, because given modern technology and like pattern matching with AI, like there's stuff you could do. Like, if all transactions are digitized, which they are now, like it should be much, much easier to find much, much smaller. The whole reason that those sort of flagging thresholds have been set by institutions is like, well, if we see people donating $10,000 or more frequently, then we can look into that specific instance further. But we now exist in an era where technology is so abundant, you can scan every transaction if you really wanted to. We have the ability to do that now. So I don't see any reason why, the limit should be set at $10,000. You should, at the very least, we should have firm caps based on a fixed amount per year, and it should all be publicly disclosed. Like, if you are in favor of a system that still has donations to political parties at the center of it, there's a way to make that much more transparent than it is. People would still ignore it, but at least the information's out there, and we can get a cool, Four Corners report 18 months from now, which sort of talks about how fucked it is. We go, oh yeah, that's pretty fucked. We should probably not do that anymore. Like, there's some mechanism in place if there's transparency. The problem is there's no transparency now, or not enough.
Don't say, you,
For
could
the same-
you could
for the
obfuscate it
same
even
reason.
further by just doing like your transactions as hookers.
It's like
and
Superman,
blow.
just like 3 cents or like a trillion times.
No, you just change the subject line of the transaction. Just change it to hookers and blow every
Yeah,
single time.
I really love that when you paid me for dinner last week, you put it down as what was it? Sex work in the transaction name. Yeah, very fun. That was fun for my wife to see. Thanks.
Did I do that? I don't remember doing that.
Did I do
Anyway.
that? Did I do that? I did have something about manufacturing
How
consent and
digitizing of
narratives,
all
something.
transactions would make it really easy to set up some kind of
Well-
negative income tax, or is that the subject of an even harder left podcast than yours?
No, I forget what it was. Something about controlling the narrative. Anyway, on that note, we've taken up enough time for these good people. We are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me on Instagram at AEC Doreen.
And you can follow us all down to the headquarters, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, where we will have a few things we're just going to print out some ABC articles and submit them and see if they can look into them. So just be like, hey, have you heard about this? Car park rorts? Have you heard about sports rorts? I think you should look into that. Jack, tell us again where people can follow you on the dreaded social medias and where they can find your book.
Oh, yeah. So all the links are at jackheathwriter.com, but you can just kind of search Jack Heath Writer on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Mastodon, but writing.exchange. So that's me.
Awesome. And so jackheathwriter.com, pick up Headcase. If it's anything like his first novel, I can guarantee you're going to be very keen on it. It's going to be an exciting ride. So thanks again for joining us, Jack, and we'll be seeing you in the next episode. Love your faces. See you next week.
Next year, maybe.
Next year. We'll see you weekly. No, you're on the podcast. You're on rotation now.
Yeah.
You got to come up with
my
this banter
publisher is
every week.
not going to like that.
Oh boy.